there is. So my talk is going to be a couple different things: data security and 2016 predictions. So who am I? My name is Jason Samide. I'm the director for Stealth Care, located here, located in Cleveland, Ohio. A little about me. My first computer was in '88. I bought my first one in '99. My career started in National City. And the last bullet point, I'm very terrible at public speaking. That's true. I do it to try to get better and overcome that. So bear with me. So what we're going to talk about is a lot of the realities in the cyber world, how history repeats itself, and lastly, some 2016 predictions. If anybody has any questions, comments, feel free to have at it. So a lot of this stuff is probably things you have already seen, but definitely worth mentioning from a reality standpoint. Cybercrime is still very much the reason why we keep having to get new credit cards, and it's growing. It's only getting worse. These criminals are getting smarter in how they're going about doing it, and basically money is a huge motivation behind a lot of their actions. Corporate America is still the largest piece of what they're going after. Basically, the low-hanging fruit, right? SQL injection or SQLi is still at an amazing 20%, followed by a 26-ish% of unknown. Anybody know why it's unknown? I mean, obviously it's unknown, but anybody have any idea why?
ZeroDays.
Where?
ZeroDays.
Well, right, but it's kind of funny. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if there's any one answer to that, but it's kind of alarming that a lot more of these attacks are unknown, and whether it's zero-day or something where untraceable or whatever. So it's interesting.
The kind of a statement on the failure of the forensic process.
Yep. Where it becomes inconclusive. So it's a lot of different things. Electronic media and portable devices. Everybody has a phone now, a smartphone, probably 20 times faster than any computer you've had in the past. So that I would expect portable devices, that piece of the pie, to increase significantly. And again, obviously in the news. So other realities that are out there. Anybody come up with any more than these? These are the ones I hear most often. I love number 7.
Number 8.
8.
10. 10's my favorite.
10, I hear that quite a bit. I'm always going to add. So anybody have any other ones I can add to this?
We're PCI compliant.
Okay, that's a good one. So basically here, I kind of drew this out here to kind of depict what these new threats that we're going to be seeing, basically coming from this area right here, right? And that's going to be what we kind of think is going to be the new Battlefront for all these different attacks. And that will basically increase that unknown factor. So threat intelligence, a lot of people have it. A lot of people don't know what that means. And talking in best practice or in an ideal world, we all know that it's going to be if we're attacked, not necessarily when. But if you look at threat intelligence, these numbers continue to grow and grow and grow. And if you look up this here, I mean that's just not a lot of companies are prepared for this kind of bill, if you will. And 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 for preparedness, and that just in this day and age, I think that hopefully would have been higher, but it's not. So what are we looking at today? A lot of these solutions are out there are not tailored to smaller or mid-sized businesses, and they're basically becoming left behind from a solution standpoint. But they tend to be some of the bigger targets out there as well. They have just as much to lose as larger companies. And we continue to be so reactive and focusing so much on defense that we're never in a spot to be proactive, right? There's a interesting man in the world where I don't always get my products approved, but when there's a breach, then the checkbook opens up, right? And it's unfortunate, but we are in that very much a reactive world, and then that definitely needs to change. And because of that reactive nature, these tools they're always going to be one step, two steps ahead of us. Anybody look up YouTube videos and see how easy it is to do a phishing scam? Their prep time for a phishing scenario is extremely low. You don't need a lot of technical ability. You have a lot of these criminals and nation states doing this at an alarming rate, and they're becoming extremely effective at it. Right? It's not the Prince of Nigeria anymore. Right? They actually have good grammar. They have good techniques. They actually have a focus, and it looks very meaningful and real. In a lot of cases, well, not a lot. In some cases, we've seen the malware be embedded into the unsubscribe link. So that's great that you don't want this email anymore, but it's in the unsubscribe hyperlink. So they're becoming very efficient, very smart about how they're doing this. And these trends, we're just not keeping up with that, and these solutions are again being very reactive. And to your point, I think you mentioned we're not being very proactive in zero-day threats, or somebody said zero-day, right? And that's very hard to do because you just change one character in a hash, and that could potentially be a zero-day, right? It's pretty simple to do that. So in an ideal world, we would create the zero-day live. And it's basically backed by research and background to synthesize some of these things that we potentially see as zero days, where we see them in dark web, right, or in forums or things of that sort, where we can present or have this breaking news or some type of actionable intelligence to provide to consumers or businesses to say, we're seeing these rumblings or these discussions in these forums, and or some type of communication, and capture that and kind of bundle that up and have some human look at that and say, this is actionable intelligence, this is real. We can see the correlation between this forum and this SCADA system, and we can kind of put two and two together. So if we could somehow do that from a corporate standpoint or from a industry standpoint, somehow be very comparative to some of the FBI type of behavioral science that they do. A lot of times when an organization has been breached, it's typically not because they found the breach. It's typically because the FBI or some other agency is telling them they've been breached, and then that's when all the problems ensue. But basically, again, in an ideal world, it's predicting these attacks before they happen. And if that's something that can be created, that would be a game changer in our industry. And again, this is moving more towards that proactive approach versus all this reactionary type of products and solutions we see out there. Anybody have any questions so far? And we as an industry, we do need some of this radical thinking because industry aside, we as consumers are basically taking on the chin every time a bank or a retail organization gets compromised. Our interest rates go up. I mean, all these charges get reversed. That's great. It's free. But we as consumers, that cost has to come from somewhere. And it's not going to be, Visa, MasterCard. It's going to be us, the consumers. So if we were to basically embrace that as an industry, could potentially start to predict some of these techniques and potentially make that unknown maybe a little bit more known from an attack standpoint. And basically, your zero-day live would help prevent cyber breaches. I forgot that word breaches out there, but cyber breaches. So if you look back at some of these more prolific hackers, this was the homeless hacker. I don't know if you guys can see that. But they've been around for quite some time, doing some pretty bad things over the course of history. And we see these in the news. We continue to, have these guys in the newspaper. We know these guys by name. So his name is a homeless hacker, right? But we're still in that reactionary mode, right? So if you look at Dark Dante, this one specifically here, his agenda, all he wanted was a new Porsche, right? But again, it's those types of people that are out there somehow maybe stealing money to get that. And these guys are becoming more and more aggressive in how they do it, looking for that low-hanging fruit. And again, this is Conrad, but his agenda, again, was unknown, right? So there's that unknown. So what we learned from history, everybody knows who Louis Pasteur was, right? So he had 3 of his 5 kids died from infectious diseases, right? So his theory was that it was germs, right, killed his kids. And nobody believed him, right? He thought he was quack, if you will. And now, he now we look back at him and say he was for his time, he was a genius, right? But it's we as an industry need to start to kind of raise our voices and say, this is what's going to happen, right? Whether it's to our board, our groups, our managers, our leaders in the industry, is to basically start to say these things so that when it does come true, like, not that I told you so, but it's correct and accurate. For example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this guy, but he knew that hand washing was very effective when he was doing medical procedures and whatnot. He couldn't prove why or how, just that it was effective. Well, they thought he was crazy. Basically, they led him into an asylum, right? They thought he was crazy for washing his hands. Now I look back at that and say, again, the guy was a genius of his time, right? For having this very novel idea, right? But being, for whatever reason, ridiculed and said, you're absolutely crazy, right? And again, we as that industry need to embrace these types of things and make that aware to others in that industry, in the industry. Anybody remember this? This is in 1988. And again, they basically came out and said, companies that build these don't care, and the hackers continued. They have no reason because failure cost, and the government is not prepared. And this is in 1998. Sorry. And what's changed since then, right? There really hasn't much changed in the government. We see that, some of these very large breaches, OPM, right, where they basically weren't doing much but fiduciary responsibility, but we still continue to have these government agencies, or the government as a whole, not really buying into this. That's been quite some time already since then. .414s, same thing, right? Group of friends who've broken a dozen of the high-profile computers. And this is in the early 1980s. So again, this is just going back to, we continue to be very reactionary in everything that we do, and we as it just has to change. There's got to be some type of radical thinking. So some of our predictions for 2016. You know what doxing is? Yes? No? Doxing is basically, taking like this whole entire room, all their personal information and putting it out on the internet, right? So if I find it somehow in some, like they did that with some police force recently, right? Where they found all their information and sent it out to the public little by little. And again, the mobile bot networks is going to increase significantly. And again, we're already seeing this, and I actually had this in here before this Apple issue, Apple versus FBI thing came in there. But, is that an encryption issue or is that a privacy issue?
Yes.
So what's more important, the encryption or the privacy? And is it one and the same? Right? I mean, obviously, the level of encryption would increase your privacy, but for them to, unlock these phones for a privacy person or for a particular reason may not be something that the general public wants to see, which goes into, the war on anonymity. Anybody ever watched that new series on Sci-Fi, The Internet Ruined My Life? No? It's pretty darn interesting what one little tweak can do for somebody's reputation, job, and so on and so forth. And some of the, especially on Twitter, where you can be very anonymous and tell people I'm going to hurt you and kill you, and it's crazy. But again, just to reiterate, this darknet will definitely be the new battle frontier. It's definitely something that we see happening more and more of. Some of these countries to watch, a lot of them look familiar. Some of the 8, 9, and 10 may not be, but we're seeing a lot of activity out of those particular countries. So again, I want to just touch base on this because I think it is very important. Is this an encryption war or privacy war? I think somebody said yes, it's kind of both, but it has to be one or the other. Sometimes in this situation, I don't think it can be both. I mean, maybe it can, but from a practical standpoint, you can have, I guess, any level of encryption that doesn't always equate to privacy. If somebody finds that back door or that key for that, then regardless of the encryption, your privacy is now compromised, right? So this is interesting how this will play out. In recent days, I've heard that FBI has contracted with a third party to unlock some of these phones, and I think today I heard something that they found some other way to unlock some phones. So I don't know.
They've done it. They've already got enough. The issue's over for them. Got into that phone.
Into that specific phone, but I think there's another 12 or 15 or so other phones that they wanted to get into at some point, right? So it's how are they going to do that going forward, right? And what's to say that they can't just take your phone and unlock it for no apparent reason, right? I mean, that's really what's that?
I wouldn't bother saying no reason.
Well, that's the whole argument, right? Is they wanted to create that back door so they could have access to some of these phones at any given point in time, right? And a lot of people say, well, I have nothing to hide, right? But then when you ask them, would you want the FBI going in your house while you're out to dinner? Well, of course, no. Well, that's the same thing, right? And I think when you put it in dinner terms, people understand that. But I mean, really, when you break it down to something that simple like that, then of course I don't want that. So, what time was it? 5:05. Internet of Things, I think it's going to be huge. Do we have a take on self-driving cars?
You're right.
What?
You're right.
Well, okay, so I think I don't know if it's the next slide, but self-driving cars. I don't think they're going to work. Right? Driving is a very cognitive thing that you do every day. You have to look both ways, red light, green light. What's going to happen when we as a population stop using our brains like that?
You're going to rely on something more reliable than.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Doesn't get sleepy.
so not to say that we're going to get dumber, but for lack of a better term, are we going to get dumber because we're not? It's just like a muscle, right? You don't use it, you're going to lose it.
You can do it like airplanes. I mean, they can actually fly planes without pilots, but they won't do that because people won't fly without pilots.
Well, I mean that's, and again, that's another argument. Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm just saying I have a tractor that will drive itself.
Well, I mean that's on a small scale. That's not going through That's not going through traffic. It's not going through traffic, right?
Drive it through Atlanta.
Yeah, or DC,
Yeah.
right?
They're already have them in Europe, in Germany.
What?
Self-driving cars. They're on the Autobahn. Very limited, but they're out there.
I hope they're right.
So, on their self-driving cars thing, if you're familiar with Charlie Miller, it just proves the point of why would you entrust your life to a self-driving car. Charlie Miller proved that the auto industry cares less about security and habitability of vehicles than convenience to use it. Think about how threat modeling a car. Why is the CAN bus on the same network as your entertainment?
It shouldn't be, but
It shouldn't be.
Right.
I mean, it's like saying you're going to put your DMZ on your core network.
right.
But they're gonna write an end user license agreement for our cars that says that all the technology in our car is property of Ford and we're not allowed to mess with it. And if we mess with it and expose a vulnerability, oh shame on you, you violated your contract with Ford.
That's possible, right? For liability purposes. But what about municipalities that rely on speeding tickets? What's that municipality going to do? How are they going to offset that revenue? Right? We have to find something, right?
They're going to exploit the vulnerabilities in the CAN bus.
Right. I mean, so anybody drive up 71 north or south? I mean, there's highway patrol all over the place. What are they going to do? If you have a self-driving vehicle, there's no purpose for them other than to respond to some accident or something.
But if they are responding to less accidents, they have less overhead and their department isn't spending so much money responding to accidents.
So what's a municipality going to do? They rely on a lot of that revenue, right? Jobs, I mean, well, highway patrol.
Highway patrol does, yeah, they have jurisdictional power. So.
But
there are parts of the state where it's either sheriff or state patrol.
yeah, but again, in some municipalities, they want somebody to run through that stop sign, right, or get that DUI. So,
No.
I mean, there's going to be that ripple effect, right? There's always going to be that, right? And I think there's going to be some other whistleblower of the Stone report in 2016 as well. So as part of this, my predictions, I also didn't want to just get my predictions. So what I did is I asked a few individuals that well respected in the industry for their prediction. So if you don't listen to mine, maybe you listen to their prediction, because again, we need to start thinking about all of this stuff very differently. So I don't know if everybody knows that this is the only picture I could find of him online, but that is Dave Kennedy. And so I asked him, I said, hey, I'd like to, here's what I'm doing for the summit here. Are you okay to give me a prediction? And this was his. Right? And it's pretty straightforward. I mean, these countries are going to be, they're not going to care that you know that they're from China or from Russia. Not that I'm naming countries by name, but they're like, yeah, what are you going to do? Yeah, we did that. Great. What are you going to do? You have no jurisdiction. You won't be able to find us. The end. Right? So. And then I don't know if you know, this is Jason Street. So if you think about what he's saying there, that they're not using domain admin rights, but rather just plain old user access, that theory of elevated privilege or escalated privileges within the organization are done. You don't need that anymore. Right? I mean, it's just like, not that I want to point the finger at like application whitelisting. I mean, that was great, but now the malware is using approved applications. I mean, it's that evolution that we create this control, and you know these attackers kind of figure it out and stick it to us again, right? At a different level.
Well, it goes back to your comment on phishing.
Yeah,
I mean, phishing is pretty low tech. I
extremely.
mean, when you think about an APT and how APTs work, you can't stop them. Most APTs are organizational based, and
Yeah.
technology based. They use simple, easy attacks that are generally phishing based or security based.
Absolutely.
So why go after an admin or a privileged account user who probably is going to be a little bit more
Smart.
Go
Not
after,
always the
not
case,
to
but
say that an admin is less smart than a privileged user, but from a security perspective, it's
Typically.
much more difficult to phish a security person with privileged rights
yeah.
than it is to phish a CFO's admin.
Yeah, but again, so now I don't need to do that anymore. Now I just go to a regular user, right, who may not be as high tech, right? Somebody in the billing department or procurement that all they do is push emails around, whatever, right? And that's a pretty easy target. Anybody else have any other predictions they want to share? Yeah. Andrew.
Where's ransomware in the list? It's all over the press now.
That's a great question. I think it's there, but it's becoming such commonplace. But it's the same thing, right? And it's
Ultimately, it's just malware.
What?
Ultimately, it's just malware.
Right, but it's definitely on the rise, right? It's these organizations are getting hit once and then getting fixed and then getting whacked like a week later, right? Because again, we're still in that reactionary phase. I mean, it's no different than the human body. You have viruses inside of you, right? But the only time that you start to actually take care of yourself is when you get a cold, right? Then you take medication, you get more sleep, drink more fluids, and we as humans, we're just very reactionary. So that mindset definitely has to change. A little bit earlier. Oh, so this is the reality in a nutshell. Right? Does anybody have any comment? I mean, is that right? Am I wrong in saying that? So, I try to be number one.
But I think to date, though, in some ways, being reactive has provided job security for folks.
And
Because
that's,
you're busy all the time.
but you can also be
But you
busy
never
being
thought-
proactive.
Right. But I'm just saying that I think our current culture is that in
Absolutely.
the recent past, we've been
Absolutely, and
reactive
that's the
to a
culture that we need to change, right? We need to go through that paradigm shift to say, I'm tired of being always 2 steps behind. Let's get on the same level, or at least a half a step ahead.
we always talk about, the IT guys are, tired of trying to put the Superman costume on. The tights are all torn and the cape's tattered. And,
Absolutely, it's time for a new suit. So, anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, aside from trolling you about tractors, sorry about that,
No problem.
I have a legitimate question. On your list of countries to watch,
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know why is it that you think the United States doesn't belong on that list?
Well, I'm sure it does, but that list is from attacks on U.S., not U.S. outbound. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I might run an organization here, and I get a lot of attacks from within the borders of the United States.
But is that just leased servers from overseas, or is that really somebody in the U.S. doing that.
I think if you try to more specifically, we're talking about state-sponsored, where sure, I mean, you have state-sponsored U.S., NSA going after, but
They don't do that anymore, though.
Yeah.
No.
But you're looking at more from the overall threat actor sponsoring.
Yeah.
If you're coming, if NSA is coming after you,
Yeah.
not so much you generally use the building or something.
But yeah, that's my last slide. You guys have any questions?